Hello, and welcome to the Bard's Truth with your host, the Green Bard. This is episode 4.2, Summer and Bran the Broken, where we'll continue our discussion of Bran and Summer in A Game of Thrones.
A Game of Thrones, Bran 5. At the next mention of Summer, he's again shadowing Bran when they all go off riding. When the direwolves go off to hunt alone, we are shown how separation during a hunt is a time of vulnerability for the boys because, for all of the bond, these wolves are wild animals. They pass beneath the gatehouse, over the drawbridge, through the outer walls. Summer and Grey Wind came loping beside them, sniffing at the wind. Close behind came Theon Greyjoy with his longbow and a quiver of broadheads. He had a mind to take a deer, he had told them. He was followed by 4 guardsmen in mailed shirts and coifs, and Jotheth, a stick-thin stableman whom Robb had named Master of Horse while Hullen was away. Maester Luwin brought up the rear, riding a donkey. Bran would have liked it better if he and Robb had gone off alone, just the two of them, but Hal Mullen would not hear of it, and Maester Luwin backed him. If Bran fell off his horse or injured himself, the Maester was determined to be with him. Later that chapter.
Bran looked around for the direwolves. Both had vanished into the wood. "Did you hear Summer howling last night?" Grey Wind was restless too, Robb said. His auburn hair had grown shaggy and unkempt, and a reddish stubble covered his jaw, making him look older than his 15 years. "Sometimes I think they know things, sense things," Robb sighed. "I never know how much to tell you, Bran. I wish you were older."
It's interesting that the boys discuss how the direwolves can sense things, yet they don't sense the threat of the wildlings. Recall how Bran earlier thought that Summer was the smartest of the pack, but somehow he doesn't recognize this relatively close threat.
Is this a plot hole, or is our author insinuating that the protection of the wolves cannot be relied upon?
Also note how Bran can recognize the howl of his own wolf, mentioned in the prior passage and the one that follows. Robb had noticed the same in Cat's chapter earlier. Is this simply their recognition of the wolves' voices, or is it another indication of the supernatural connection of their bond?
They were on the far side when they heard the howl, a long rising wail that moved through the trees like a cold wind. Bran raised his head to listen. "Summer," he said. No sooner had he spoken than a second voice joined the first. "They've made a kill," Robb said.
As the attack begins, note how Summer is careful, first checking the wind to assess the threat. Later he is careful not to be injured by Holly. Is this an example of his mirroring Bran's own carefulness, honed through years of climbing? It may also be potential warging, with Bran using his eyes to see the danger and Summer sensing it through Bran.
Robb whistled. They heard the faint sound of soft feet on wet leaves. The undergrowth parted, low-hanging branches giving up their accumulation of snow, and Grey Wind and Summer emerged from the green. Summer sniffed the air and growled. "Wolves," gasped Holly.
Later that chapter.
A few feet away, Summer darted in and snapped at Holly. The knife bit at his flank. Summer slid away, snarling, and came rushing in again. This time his jaws closed around her calf. Holding the knife with both hands, the small woman stabbed down, but the direwolf seemed to sense the blade coming. He pulled free for an instant, his mouth full of leather and cloth and bloody flesh. When Holly stumbled and fell, he came at her again, slamming her backward, teeth tearing at her belly.
Take note of the next line. In that moment, Bran saw everything. It's a very eerie line. I must wonder, in this traumatic experience, is this an indication that he is partially warging Summer? Could he be seeing everything because he's seeing through 2 sets of eyes?
In that moment, Bran saw everything. Summer was savaging Holly, pulling glistening blue snakes from her belly. Her eyes were wide and staring. Bran could not tell whether she was alive or dead. The gray, stubbly man and the one with the axe lay unmoving, but Osha was on her knees, crawling toward the fallen spear. Grey Wind padded toward her, dripping wet. "Call him off," the big man shouted. "Call them both off, or the crippled boy dies now." "Grey Wind, Summer, to me," Robb said. The direwolves stopped, turned their heads. Grey Wind loped back to Robb. Summer stayed where he was, his eyes on Bran and the man beside him. He growled. His muzzle was wet and red, but his eyes burned. Osha used the butt of her spear to lever herself back to her feet. Blood leaked from a wound on the upper arm where Robb had cut her. Bran could see sweat trickling down the big man's face. Stiv was as scared as he was, he realized. "Starks," the man muttered. "Bloody Starks." He raised his voice. "Osha, kill the wolves and get his sword."
When Stiv threatens Bran, Grey Wind immediately obeys Robb's command to stand down, but Summer is having none of it. He is intent on protecting Bran, and in mirroring Bran he is more independent than his brother. He never considers taking his burning eyes off Bran. Take note also of Stiv's words about Starks. My interpretation of this line is that he's heard tales of Starks being wargs. They were probably just stories to him until now. His comment seems full of regret for coming near Winterfell, and he's right to regret it. What an idiot. In that passage, and the one to follow, we also see the horror of the direwolf's ferocity and the lack of fear of men in how they savage the corpses. That part is truly sickening. The next mention of Summer is where he's feeding on Holly. This is the first time the wolves consider men to be meat in the series. Robb's men, even Luwin, are horrified.
The guardsmen had a strange pale look on their faces as they took in the scene of slaughter. They eyed the wolves uncertainly, and when Summer returned to Holly's corpse to feed, Joseph dropped his knife and scrambled for the bush, heaving. Even Maester Luwin seemed shocked as he stepped from behind a tree, but only for an instant. Then he shook his head and waded across the stream to Bran's side. "Are you hurt?"
A Game of Thrones, Bran 6. The next chapter is mostly a montage of different times Summer is shadowing and protecting Bran. We also get good indications of how even allies are fearful around the wolves. Later we see them being affectionate with each other again.
They were last, he knew. The other lords were already here with their hosts. Bran yearned to ride out among them, to see the winter houses full to bursting, the jostling crowds in the market square every morning, the streets rutted and torn by wheel and hoof. But Robb had forbidden him to leave the castle. "We have no men to spare to guard you," his brother had explained. "I'll take Summer," Bran argued.
Later.
As they passed beneath the gatehouse portcullis, Bran put 2 fingers into his mouth and whistled. Summer came loping across the yard. Suddenly the Karstark lancers were fighting for control as their horses rolled their eyes and whickered in dismay. One stallion reared, screaming, his rider cursing and hanging on desperately. The scent of the direwolves sent horses into a frenzy of fear if they were not accustomed to it. But they'd quiet soon enough once Summer was gone. "The gods would," Bran reminded Hodor.
Later.
He tried not to flinch as Hodor ducked through a low door. They walked down a long dim hallway, Summer padding easily beside them. The wolf glanced up from time to time, eyes smoldering like liquid gold. Bran would have liked to touch him, but he was riding too high for his hand to reach.
Later we see them being affectionate with each other again. Clearly their bond is deepening. The final line of the passage reminds us of the power Bran has and how it can deepen their bond. He is dreaming with the gods. Note how Bran is comfortable with the old gods. This is possible foreshadowing of his eventual connection to the Weirwood Net.
Summer lapped at the water and settled down at Bran's side. He rubbed the wolf under the jaw, and for a moment boy and wolf felt at peace. Bran had always liked the godswood, even before, but of late he found himself drawn to it more and more. Even the heart tree no longer scared him the way it used to. The deep red eyes carved into the pale trunk still watched him, yet somehow he took comfort from that now. The gods were looking over him, he told himself. The old gods. Gods of Stark and the first men and the children of the forest, his father's gods. He felt safe in their sight, and the deep silence of the trees helped him think. Bran had been thinking a lot since his fall, thinking and dreaming and talking with the gods.
When Lady's bones were returned, all 3 wolves howled in mourning. She was packed. They must have identified her scent. Or was it by some supernatural means?
Bran felt all cold inside. "She lost her wolf," he said, weakly, remembering the day when 4 of his father's guardsmen had returned from the south with Lady's bones. Summer and Grey Wind and Shaggydog had begun to howl before they crossed the drawbridge, in voices drawn and desolate.
The next exchange is interesting. The wind has been used before to signify the old gods trying to talk. While Bran may be comfortable with the old gods, Summer may not be. Or it could be that Summer is growling at Asha. Either way, it makes me concerned that the power of the Weirwoods may not be benevolent, given how the wolves seem to be better judges of danger than the children. Reminding us of the fear the wolves inspire, Asha is very uneasy. I wonder why. Personal experience much? The exchange ends with Summer obeying, then being affectionate with Bran.
A faint wind sighed through the godswood, and the red leaves stirred and whispered. Summer bared his teeth. "You hear them, boy?" a voice asked. Bran lifted his head. Asha stood across the pool, beneath an ancient oak, her face shadowed by leaves. Even in irons, the wildling moved quiet as a cat. Summer circled the pool, sniffed at her. The tall woman flinched. "Summer, to me," Bran called. The dire wolf took one final sniff, spun, and bounded back. Bran wrapped his arms around him. "What are you doing here?" He had not seen Asha since they'd taken her captive in the Wolfswood, though he knew she'd been set to working in the kitchens.
Note that after the interaction with Asha, Maester Luwin started telling Bran that magical creatures, giants and children of the forest in this case, no longer existed. This would be the first of many times where Luwin filled Bran's head with skepticism about magic, only to be proven wrong. It is comforting to Bran, but he ultimately knows the Maester's ideas don't pass muster. A Game of Thrones, Bran 7. The next chapter is mainly about Bran's dream of Ned being in the crypts. Luwin doesn't believe the dream to be meaningful and takes Bran there to prove it. Luwin, you know nothing. We see several examples of our themes with Summer and Bran, including shadowing, affection, savagery, and obedience.
They don't fight very well, Bran said dubiously. He scratched Summer idly behind the ears as the direwolf tore at a hunch of meat. Bones crunched between his teeth.
Later that chapter.
Summer, come, Bran called as she lifted him in wiry, strong arms. The direwolf left his bone and followed as Asha carried Bran across the yard and down the spiral steps to the cold vault under the earth. Maester Luwin went ahead with the torch. Bran did not even mind too badly that she carried him in her arms and not on her back. Sir Roderick had ordered Asha's chain struck off since she had served faithfully and well since she had been at Winterfell.
Notice in the next passage how Summer does not want to go into the crypts. I assume this to be related to instinct to fear the whites.
He wished they were here now. The vault might not have seemed so dark and scary. Summer stalked out of the echoing gloom, then stopped, lifted his head, and sniffed the chill, dead air. He bared his teeth and crept backward, eyes glowing golden in the light of the maester's torch. Even Asha, hard as old iron, seemed uncomfortable. Grim folk by the look of them, she said as she eyed the long row of granite Starks on their stone thrones.
Later.
The vault was cavernous, longer than Winterfell itself, and Jon had told him once that there were other levels underneath, vaults even deeper and darker where the older kings were buried. It would not do to lose the light. Summer refused to move from the steps, even when Asha followed with the torch, Bran in her arms.
Summer may have been skittish about going into the crypts,
but at the first sign of danger he leaps to Bran's protection. Shaggydog turns out to be the danger, and this is the first of several times where Summer needs to keep his black brother in check, now that Grey Wind has left with Robb.
"Summer!" Bran screamed, and Summer came, shooting from the dimness behind them, a leaping shadow. He slammed into Shaggydog and knocked him back, and the two dire wolves rolled over and over in a tangle of gray and black fur, snapping and biting at each other, while Maester Luwin struggled to his knees, his arm torn and bloody. Asha propped Bran up against Lord Rickard's stone wolf as she hurried to assist the maester. In the light of the guttering torch, shadow wolves 20 feet tall fought on the wall and roof. "Shaggy!" a small voice called. When Bran looked up, his little brother was standing in the mouth of Father's tomb. With one final snap at Summer's face, Shaggydog broke off and bounded to Rickon's side. "You let my father be," Rickon warned Luwin. "You let him be."
Later.
"You can wait with me," Bran said. "We will wait together, you and me and our wolves." Both of the dire wolves were licking wounds now, and would bear close watching.
This rare moment of affection and indulgence of Rickon must mean the world to the boy. Bran's empathy here shines. They both want to be with their wolves. In the rookery later, do the wolves seem to sense the boy's dread as the raven announcing Ned's death arrives, even as Summer first senses the raven? It's worth wondering if the dire wolves experience some of the boy's non-wolf dreams. Did they understand the context of the dream to mean that Ned had died before the raven arrived? One might assume their howling was only an indication that they were mirroring the boy's dread, but there was no prior sign of an arrival of a raven. We might assume that Summer smelled, saw, or heard it approaching, although without the context of the news it would bring, why howl? Did Bran subconsciously supply that context? Did his nascent connection to the weirwoods tell Bran it was coming?
Summer began to howl. Maester Luwin broke off, startled. When Shaggydog bounded to his feet and added his voice to his brother's, dread clutched at Bran's heart. "It's coming," he whispered, with the certainty of despair. He had known it since last night, he realized. Since the crow had led him down into the crypts to say farewell. He had known it, but he had not believed. He had wanted Maester Luwin to be right. The crow, he thought, the three-eyed crow. The howling stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Summer padded across the tower floor to Shaggydog and began to lick at the mat of bloody fur on his brother's neck. From the window came a flutter of wings.
Maester Luwin was not right. Ned's dead, baby. Ned's dead. This final chapter was a real eye-opener about the contrast between a maester's view and the power that Bran actually possesses. The dream Rickon and Bran had had about Ned being killed was informed by some supernatural means, telepathy or magic. My personal opinion is that it was not an example of a predictive dream, but merely information from far away, via the weirwood net. It is undetermined whether these dreams/visions which many experience in the series, not just Bran, are actively pushed by some motivated actor, as with Bloodraven in Bran's case, or whether some are passively leaking out of the weirwood net, as may be the case with Rickon. As a final thought on Bran and Summer's story in A Game of Thrones, their bond is shown to be special in how it seems stronger than his siblings, and is also augmented by Bran's nascent powers and their connection to the weirwoods. Bran's power is clarified in this final chapter. He is definitely able to receive supernatural messages from dreams beyond his connection to Summer.
That's it for Summer and Bran in A Game of Thrones. Join us next time when we tackle A Clash of Kings. Thanks to all the terrific artists who let me use their work on this YouTube video. Thanks as always to my family, in this case for the art. If you enjoy this content, you can also consider supporting us on Patreon.